how's it going? I'm Terry Jensen. I'm the pastor of First Baptist Church, Plano, Illinois, and I welcome you to Tuesday's edition of Through the Week. Yeah, we're about through the week too. My week starts on Sunday, so I'm hitting hump day right now. We've been talking about the Christian life and how to live the Christian life, and essentially, for anyone who's listening to this, it's about having a moral and ethical base for living your life. It's a lot harder to do when faith doesn't come in to practice. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't matter whether you're a believer or not. When faith doesn't come into practice, it's really difficult to be moral and to be ethical because one must believe in what morals are, in what ethics are. And not only do you need to believe these things, but you need to put them in practice. You believe them in such a way that they are at the very core of who you are. So we've been talking about how do you understand who you are in light of who God is, and how do you understand this world around you and the pitfalls that really hit you. Well, one of the things that we talked about was actually from James, and it was having to do with the process of sin and death. And James was telling us that the real start of it all is not sin itself or even temptation, but your desires. Whatever it is that you're desiring, no matter how evil or nasty, or even if it's something like a candy bar. But your desires bring forth temptation. And you may think about that Snickers bar. And you may think, that chocolate covering those wonderful peanuts and nougat. Oh, caramel. I want it. Temptation. Once you said I want it, that's that temptation, man. It just hit you, smacked you across the face, and you went boing. And what do? You run out and go get you a Snickers bar. Now, that in and of itself is just not that evil or anything like that. However, it does stretch into those things that are evil. So, it is your own desires that cause you to be tempted. And once you're tempted, that gives birth to sin. And when sin is born, just like a little itty bitty baby, it grows. And you feed it because you're tempted and you give in to those temptations and your desires, and that sin grows. And when sin matures, it brings forth death. Now, this is at the heart of how we live as Christians. To understand that process, to know what it is to live in a world that is constantly alluring you. Do you like that word? Allure? Constantly alluring you toward temptation. What do? Well, we're going to take a look at 2 Peter today. And 2 Peter does have something to go along with this and give us an understanding. So let's take a look at it. 2 Peter 1:3 goes, God's power has given us everything we need to lead a godly life. All of that has come to us because we know the one who chose us. He chose us because of his glory and goodness. He has also given us his very great and valuable promises. He did it so you could share in his nature. He also did it so you could escape from the evil in the world. That evil is caused by sinful longings. Sinful longings. Wow. Sounds a lot like temptation, doesn't it? Or desire. But the point that Peter's trying to make is that God has given us everything pertaining to life and godliness. That comes from uh, a different translation. But he's giving us everything we need to live a godly life, to live a life that is free from temptation. That's a pretty tough nut to crack. Christmas time, you ever get the mixes of fresh nuts and try to break into a Brazil nut? Oh man, I never could get that thing out without just tearing it apart and tearing the nut apart at the same time. But desire is a tough nut to crack, and so is temptation. But Second Peter is telling us that God has given us everything that we need to live a godly life, to live a life in an adverse situation where temptation brought on by our desires leading to sin, we have a way out of this. And it has to do with the nature of God. Now, I know that there's some question as to whether we possess the nature of God and whether or not that in our being created in the image of God means that we are created in his character and nature to bring it forward on the earth. I'm one of those who believes that it does mean that we do possess some of God's character and his nature. And I think that given that, we have the ability and the strength to manage our desires, our longings, our temptations, and yes, our sinful activity. I know that people want to say that we can't control sin. And that's so that it gives us an out. So that as we're dealing with sin, we have an excuse that we can give ourselves. Well, man, I'm just a sinful creature. Yes. But because of Jesus Christ, because of what he did on the cross, because of his sacrifice, we have been, and you've heard it over and over, born again. Each one of us has been born again. We've been born into the kingdom of God. We are new creatures, according to 2 Corinthians. We have been made new. The old has passed away. Behold, all things are made new. We are made new. Understand what it is to fall into temptation, to fall into sin, and then just wallow in it, ending up in death, a separation from God. Understanding that it comes from our desires. Know what your desires are, and know what desires this world implants in you. You don't have to accept what the world is giving you. You don't have to take what the world is throwing at you. You don't. It's not yours. You don't have to take it. So, got you something to think about, huh? Well, that's it for me. I'm out of here. I'm Terry Jensen, and if you would please, when you see this, subscribe to it. Push the like button. Tell us what you think, okay? We appreciate it. So, I'm out of here. See ya.